How far do you deviate from a pre-written adventure usually? Do you try to include player backstories into the plot as much as possible, or do you use them as kind of like a loose background thing in the overall story? Also, in your experience, do you have a better time playing the module with including player backstory in pre-writtens if you do? Hi, you might notice something's a bit different in this video, likely because you can see my face. I've been spending the entire month of February and a little bit into March now building this little setup now. I'm in a place where I'm moving a lot less and I can have time to sit down and record these face videos now. The background will change a bit. Amazon has been very slow. However, for the foreseeable future, this is the Q&A video format. And you'll be seeing this face more in actual videos too, so yeah. But time to answer your question. I know for me, when I'm running a pre-written adventure, I try to incorporate player backstory as much as humanly possible. And this is because you can feel very disconnected from the overall plot of the campaign if your player isn't invested in something. Now, player investment is this very difficult thing to begin to pin down, but usually at the beginning of campaigns, it's easiest to draw from their backstory to get that investment. You know, it's something that they've created, and if they've created it, in all likelihood, they're going to be drawn to that backstory. And that backstory can be a well that you draw from the majority of the campaign. But also, player backstories help in just creating plot hooks. I mean, if the player creates an NPC, then if they hear about that NPC in the campaign, they're going to be motivated to investigate. So yes, absolutely include player backstories as much as humanly possible, even in pre-written adventures. I know some of the worst pre-written adventures I've been in is just running them actually by the book. I know some of the worst campaigns I've been in is when a dungeon master has told us, look, I'm not going to incorporate pre-written character backstories into this campaign. And I think that stems from partially not wanting to put in that much time into a character because I'm expecting, okay, I'm going to be drugged through the story. But then the story has to rise to the level where it can pull me in on its own. The NPCs, the characters, the plot line, the encounters, everything has to do all the heavy lifting, which is just naturally more difficult to do. So, yes, I have a much better time with me and my players incorporating player backstories into pre-written adventures. I know that might seem odd to some, because the pre-written adventure is supposed to be everything done for you. That's very rarely the case, I found. Usually I'm doing about the same amount of prep work for a pre-written adventure than with a homebrew adventure. It's about the same. Why is it the same? Number of reasons. I mean, you got to get your notes down into a readable format. You're going to read through the book, get your minis, get your terrain, set up a VTT if you have that. It's not just a plug and play most times you're running a pre-written adventure. Now, some of you might be asking, okay, well, how do you actually put in characters from a backstory into a pre-written adventure that isn't meant for them? Well, the easiest thing to do is just replace the names. That's it. Just replace the names of certain characters. If there's one villain lieutenant in the story that keeps showing up and the player has written a character, an NPC that fits that role, you can just swap them in. Even if you need to do a little bit of tweaking to that lieutenant, it's still better than just leaving the player's backstory out. It's not actually that difficult. A lot of Wizards of the Coast NPCs are kind of bland. They're not really doing much in the adventure, and any of the actual characteristics that they're giving you, you can really swap them out. So yeah, you can just replace the names, begin to slowly alter some of the details of the NPCs if you need to. Talk to the players as well. If they write a backstory, you can say, hey, can we add this one aspect to this NPC? That will make it easier for me to include them into the story. 99 out of 100 times, the player is going to say yes. They're absolutely going to say yes because they want their backstory in the campaign. If it's going to make it easier for you in the table to engage with that NPC, go for it. You could also give a series of guidelines to the players to make it easier for you to include these NPCs in the actual campaign. You might say, hey, if you're writing a backstory, have some link to Barovia. Have one NPC that's running around Barovia. Heck, when I run Curse of Strahd, usually I will skip the Death House, which is levels like 1 to 3 generally, and I'll spend that time getting the characters into Barovia, making sure that they are invested into Barovia and we understand where the important NPCs in their backstory are. It might take me 2 to 4 sessions to actually do, but then when the players get to Barovia, they're meeting NPCs that they know. They have objectives that they wish to complete, and it's personal to their characters. It makes it so much better. So yeah, pretty pleased. With the cherry on top, add in player backstories into the campaign. It's not even all that much extra work. 30 minutes of extra work for a group of 4 players, and you have just doubled, maybe tripled their investment into the campaign starting out. Especially if you tell them, hey, if we need to make a change to an NPC, if I am doing something behind the scenes, it's to make sure that we explore your backstory. And that's it. That's it, and your players will love you for it. They're going to say, this is a fantastic DM. And you're going behind the scenes and saying, I just changed some names. I added a side quest or 2 that they could go on to engage with their backstories, but mainly you've done nothing. You've done nothing, but you've done everything. So, just do that. Next commenter has 2 questions. When it comes to balancing a single boss enemy, is there anything you suggest giving said enemy to give the party a challenge, and how much to give the enemy based on the party composition? For example, if you have a party of 4 level 3 player characters, and they're going up against one enemy, how do you know how many abilities or legendary actions / resistances it needs to give the party a challenge? Great question. So there's 2 things that I always tell DMs to look out for, especially in 5th edition D&D, which it sounds like you're running. First, total hit points that the party has, and the second, how many actions the party is contributing to the action economy. Let's start first with total hit points. By total hit points, I mean the total effective hit points of a party. This is taking in average healing or temporary hit point gain that the party is getting. So if you have a Twilight Cleric, they might be doing, 5 temporary hit points per round? Let's say at the low end for a Twilight Cleric. So when I'm planning encounters and boss fights, I'm going to say the party has about an extra, party of 4, that's 20 per round, 20 times 3, 60 extra hit points in this combat. And I get there because mainly we want a D&D combat to last 3 to 4 rounds. That's about right. It prevents us from getting into that slog effect, as we don't want to go really beyond that. So then we're going to match total party hit points, total effective hit points, to the boss's hit points. So if the party has 200 effective hit points, the boss is going to have 200 hit points. Makes it pretty easy. And that's for a number of reasons, but the main thing is that on average, a player character can deal their total hit points in about 3 rounds of combat. Some player characters and classes go higher, some go lower, but it's a good starting number for your party. And you can dial that in depending on how many combats you run for a party, but I have never TPK'd a party going with that particular metric. Then we're going to look at how many actions a player character is adding to the action economy, the total party actions. So if you have a level 4 fighter, on average they're going to add about 1.5 actions to the action economy. This is because they have 1 attack as an action, which they're probably going to be using, and then we're going to account for another 0.5 because they have something like action surge. For spellcasters, I usually say they add a number of actions to the action economy that's about equal to the tier of play that the party is in. So the tiers of play are 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20. So a level 1 spellcaster is adding 1 to the action economy, and a level 7 spellcaster is adding about 2 to the action economy. Obviously, if you're running a combat with a lot of minions, like 30 goblins packed together in a tight hallway, then the spellcaster's action economy is going to be a bit higher. They're just going to drop a fireball, or a firestorm, or a wall of fire. Anything with fire, basically. But I found that's good shorthand until you can dial the numbers in yourself. Then we're going to look to the boss stat block, and we're going to say, alright, do the boss's actions that we've constructed about equal or exceed the party's actions? Now, whoever has the advantage in the action economy is going to have the advantage across the entirety of the combat. We don't have time in this video to explain action economy and everything that goes with it, but just know, if you're equal in the action economy, it's going to be a more balanced and equal fight. If one side exceeds the other in the action economy, that side's going to have the advantage. So wrapping back around, the way that we're going to figure out how many legendary actions to give is to say, all right, what's the difference between the actions of the party and our actions? Now, the way we're going to figure out how to give legendary actions to a boss monster is the difference between the party's actions and the boss's actions, their effective actions. Like, for instance, a red dragon's breath weapon attack is not equal to one action. It's probably not equal to the actions of the number of party members it's going to hit. It's a very effective, very damaging thing that dragon is going to do. So we might say that red dragon's breath attack is 2 for every single party member it's going to hit. So the number of legendary actions we're going to give a creature is equal to the difference in the action economy. But say we have a Hydra, and this Hydra is homebrewed and it's going to be making 9 attacks per round. Well, that might meet or exceed what we need for that party. So that's not a creature that we need to give legendary actions to. But if you have one massive giant and it makes one big attack on its turn and then nothing else, well then we're going to give enough legendary actions to meet the difference. Now for resistances, this is a little more tricky and it almost kind of depends on how long you want a combat to go. Usually I'll study my party once they level up and I'll go, alright, about how many saves are they throwing out per round? So if it's a party mostly filled with barbarians and fighters, it might be very low, like 0.25 actual saves per round. If it's a party filled with spellcasters, wizards, sorcerers, warlocks, yeah, that's probably going to be a lot higher. It might be 1.5 saves per round. And then I'm going to give a number of legendary actions that, on average, will make it so that this creature can survive until round 3. And this is because we want the party to beat the boss. We want the party to win the engagement. So if we give out too many legendary resistances, they're never gonna do that unless they just deal damage. So I'd say, on average, give as many legendary resistances as you need for them to run out round 2 or beginning of round 3. That way, if the party is sending spells and saves towards this creature, eventually it's going to run out during the combat. Also, pro tip, it's a great idea to give your party some way to identify how many legendary resistances this creature has left. Like if you're fighting an ice elemental creature, maybe there are certain bits of ice that break off when it uses a legendary resistance, and the party can count, okay, it had 4 of these at the start of the battle, now it has 1. We can literally see that we're chipping away at its defenses. Now, other things that I would suggest giving a boss monster is movement abilities that don't provoke attacks of opportunity. That way it can move around the battlefield, attack different players, and keep the battle dynamic. It should also usually have a way of changing the battlefield, kind of a stalagmite's falling from the ceiling, or maybe it opens up a crack across the middle of the boss arena. Just something to keep the battle feeling moving and dynamic. I think the worst boss fights are the ones where the boss plants itself in one place, the players group around it, and then it's just, alright, who has the bigger numbers the entire fight? And there's very little strategy involved in that. Another balancing tool you can use is just adding a second phase to a boss monster. And what this is going to do is act as a stopgap. So if the boss is losing hit points a little bit too quickly for your taste, once it hits that stopgap, maybe for the rest of the round, that boss monster is not going to be taking any more damage. Maybe it cocoons. Maybe it has this roaring ball of fire around it that makes it so no damage can get through. Or it's resistant to all damage or something. And that's going to make sure that your boss battle is going to feel epic and go on for the desired length of time. Here's a good barometer to see if your boss fight is going to be dynamic. Look at your boss fight prep. If that prep does not lend itself to a changing battlefield or a changing environment, add something. And literally that's it. Boss fights usually go on for a while, and if they are not dynamic and changing, no matter the stakes, they might feel a bit boring. I was in a campaign once where we were fighting this massive red dragon boss, but it very quickly became a numbers slog. Despite it being the end of an epic level campaign, it was kind of 3 hours of just rolling dice until it inevitably died. So make sure the boss is moving and make sure the encounter is changing. But then you have another question here. What do you think of a grand event in the narrative changing how spells function? Is this fair or even worth the trouble doing? I am cooking up a campaign in which the goddess of water has gone missing, rumored to be dead, and with her, most of the world's water went with her. I have the idea in my head that this also made spells that are based around water, like create/destroy water, not function at all. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but there has to be a reason to do it. I would also say that you should probably have player buy-in from everyone. It's the worst thing if the players are expecting to have these spells or for the spells to function in a specific way and for it to change on them. Like in a lot of TTRPGs, the fairness comes with how you present it to the players and how much buy-in you get from them. If the players all agree and there's no problems with it, then I don't see a problem with fairness. But if there are players that raise some objections or don't feel gung-ho about it, I would probably say hold off. Next question though, what do you consider when wanting to give your players very powerful magic items? I'm currently running a campaign with only 2 players and I'm having a difficult time trying to scale them up to they want to play. To where they want to play? Probably. Do you think giving them more magic items is a good way to artificially scale them? I'm a newer DM and I'm trying to learn. Thanks. There is an Oath of Vengeance Paladin and an Order of Scribes Wizard. So again, the problem here is health and action economy. Your players do not have enough actions to scale with some of the larger level creatures that expect a party of 4 and many more actions than your players have. So with your campaign, we have 2 different options. 1, give them magic items that artificially increase the number of actions they have, like Boots of Haste that are going to give another action to the players every single turn. Boom, instant action economy increase. Or we can artificially scale down the monster hit points so it's more fair to the players. Now, they're still going to be at an action economy disadvantage, but they have far less of a way to go, and they are likely going to be outpacing these monsters. And another great way to artificially scale the players is to just give them follower NPCs that they play during combat. That way, they just have more actions because there are more people in the action economy on their side. I'm a big fan of this strategy in any TTRPG campaign, just giving the players follower NPCs that they can play with in combat. Really nice, adds more dynamics to any party, and if there's a particular role or niche, like healer, that the players aren't getting around to in the party composition, just giving them a healer, letting them play the healer while having their other character, A+. A+. Now, to answer your original question, what do I consider when giving my players powerful magic items? The only thing I consider is this item infringing on a niche of another player character? And by niche, I mean the thing that this player does in and outside of combat. So, you might have 2 fighters. One fighter is a melee fighter, one fighter is a ranged fighter. If I give the melee fighter an item that allows them to attack from 60 feet away with the same amount of efficiency, well, I might have just infringed on the ranged fighter's niche, and that's something I'm going to consider. But this is my outlook on balancing. If everything is overpowered, nothing is. The balancing in these campaigns is just math. It's making sure the numbers equal each other. And if I know what the players' numbers are, I can formulate combats that are going to challenge them. Plain and simple. So really, figure out what you can balance. If you can't handle a Twilight Cleric, small mechanical bonuses. +1 to damage, an extra d6 of fire damage, whatever. But if you're better at balancing, you can go higher up the power food chain. This is an example of an item I gave a player character at about level 10. In another party, it would be considered cataclysmically broken. For the power level of that party though, it was balanced. It was about average. The player character had their strengths, they had their weaknesses, everything was fine. But the player felt epic. The party felt epic. And it wasn't broken. It wasn't unbalanced because I could balance the numbers. You see? So this is what I would do in your situation. I would give an item to each of the player characters that could grow with them. Maybe like some magic shield to the paladin, and then a magic wand to the wizard. For the paladin, that shield's purpose is to give the party more hit points. We're going to turn that party into the tank so that they can tank the additional attacks from all the high level creatures that are going to be getting sent at the party. And then for the wizard, that wand's going to increase the action economy. It's going to increase the number of spells that they can cast. Maybe it's going to increase the damage of the spells. Whatever the case, these items we're going to use to balance everything out. Or we could do the exact opposite. The paladin gets the thing that gives them more damage, more attacks, and the wizard becomes more tanky. Or we could just give them all the offensive tools. Both of them are going to be buzzsaws. However, if they don't win early, the enemies are going to overwhelm them. That is where the challenge and the difficulty lies. Or we could do the exact opposite of that and give them all defensive tools so that they can tank the damage that is coming at them. Basically, balancing is a lie. Don't let the niches overlap. I mean, there might even be circumstances where the niches overlapping with a party that small is fine. Just know what you can handle. If you can handle giving the players these greater magic items without breaking the game, do that. Next, though, we're going to head over to the Patreon questions. And if you want to make sure your questions are 100% guaranteed to be answered, you can head over to the Patreon, subscribe at any tier, and your questions will be answered every month. First question, though, have you ever run a Vanquisher character with a focus on ranged weapons? I'm about to join a campaign as a sniper-themed character, and I thought it could be fun to run a Vanquisher Sniper. Yeah, I've seen it a few times. It's great fun. The best dip I think you can make for it is after 7th or 8th level, probably after 8th level, then you dip once or twice into Rogue and get the aim bonus action, which allows you to get advantage on an attack. Why is that good? Because after 7th level, when you have advantage on a roll, you can make that advantage a critical once per turn. Now you have to be 9th level to do this. You're only getting an extra d6 from sneak attack, but it's a very fun combination to use. Otherwise, look for anything and everything that's going to give you advantage really after 7th level, but even before. Really, just look for ways to get advantage with this character. Because you're scoring a critical hit on a 19 or 20, you have double the critical hit range. The more dice that you are rolling when you're attacking, the better. Then that's going to help you for once you get to your 10th level ability, Bloodlusted Critical. I build my subclasses with the intent that at 10th level, it's a mini capstone. Most players aren't playing far after that, so I want that level to feel good, because for most campaigns, 95% of those campaigns, that's going to be the end. You're not going to go far past 10th level, so that needs to be a really good ability and a reason to get to that level. And hey, if you make it to 10th level in Vanquisher and you get to have one of 3 different options when you score a critical hit every round, that's awesome. Go for that. Let's see, what other tips can I give you? If you want to apply the facing rules in the DMG, that can get you advantage on ranged attacks early. Shooting out of darkness, if you have dark vision and the enemies can't see you, that's going to give you advantage. Certain conditions like restrained or paralyzed, that's going to give you advantage. Get advantage. That's the #1 goal of this subclass. If you are getting advantage, you're doing it right. And I heavily suggest talking to the rest of your party mates, saying, look, getting advantage is really good for me. So if you take a spell like Fairy Fire, I'd really appreciate that. That's going to make me far more effective in combat. Or, if you want to get really crazy, you can ask them to take something like True Strike. If you have a Sorcerer, then it might just be good for them to quicken spell a True Strike for you, because that's a free critical hit on that character. So, think out of the box. Get advantage whenever possible, and you're doing good. Also, it's crazy that you're using my subclass, so I feel honored. Thank you. Next question, though. You have incredible content that is extremely helpful and insightful. Well, thank you. It's inspired me to try my hand at running my own campaign, so thank you. Oh, we said thank you to each other. That's so nice. My question is, how do you begin new campaigns specifically bringing the PCs together without using the classic you all meet at a tavern? Well, good news. That's the next video. You said the question right as I was answering it, kind of. But yeah, I'm going to give you a lot of examples in this video of ways to start outside of a tavern. Basically, though, the best way to do that is having a reason for the players to be somewhere. Like an example I'm going to give in this next video is a wedding. And the reason why a wedding is so good is all the player characters have a reason to be there, and there's a backstory built into this event. All of these things play into where you start. So if you can give a place some backstory that the players can latch onto, it's usually a good thing. Usually the best places to start outside of a tavern is an event. Some sort of event that is bringing the players together, that they have a reason to come here, and there's a built-in sense of, alright, we all know what we're doing here. Another thing you can also try to do is start 1 hour after the tavern. It's an in medias res start. An in medias res is a Latin term that means in the middle of the thing. And what this basically means is you take for granted that the party starts at the tavern and they're going to go save the blacksmith's daughter. So, what happens? Well, we start the campaign directly as they're kicking down the door to the goblin dungeon and they're about to have their big fight. And what this does is it cuts out all that middle area, that time that the players are spending trying to understand their characters. They're going to have some awkward conversations. No one really knows who's who. But if you introduce the characters as they're breaking down the door in combat and say, Player A, introduce your character and what you're doing on your turn during the first round of combat, then the players connect. All right, this is the player, this is their character, this is what they can do in combat. You're making sure that they're more easily connectable. Obviously, I highly recommend an in medias res start. They are high octane, action filled, and make it so that you are learning who your character is as you're playing them. And there's no kind of these awkward downtime moments where you're all sitting around looking at each other going, all right, when's the campaign gonna start? It's already started. And then as soon as the encounter ends, you're going to go save the blacksmith's daughter. You might banter with each other. You're going to take her back. You're going to be talking. And then at the very end of all of this, the party can look at each other and go, hey, we did pretty good. You know, who are you guys? What are you doing? And you have some things to talk about. Like if the warlock used Eldritch Blast in the middle of combat, that's a lot better of a question than, okay, well, who are you? Who are you? Just tell me about yourself. It's a better question to ask, hey, what was that weird green spell that you used that blew up the goblin boss? You know, that's more interesting. And giving your players these moments, these events to do it, A+. Okay, Jackson's up next. I know you've talked about this before, but what is the secret to player engagement? It would have been an easier question to ask. What is the purpose of life? But I'm going to give a crack at it. The secret to player engagement is investment. If your players are invested in their characters and in the world, in the story, they are going to be engaged. Now, what makes a player invested in their character, in the world, in the story, etc.? It's a million different things. Usually they're going to be invested in either their own character, their backstory, what you're doing with that. They're going to be invested in beloved NPCs, making NPCs that the players truly want to be around, where they can be invested somehow in the story. This requires you to do the most heavy lifting, and even the best DMs fail at this from time to time. But I think the biggest underlying thread through all of this is to make it personal for the players. If the story becomes personal, and the villain does something that personally affects the player, you're going to get engagement. If the backstory becomes something personal that the player loves after playing through it, after using it, well, you just got yourself some player engagement. If something terrible happens to a beloved NPC, and the player characters are going to rally around them and get justice for them, doesn't mean the NPC has to die, because that's actually going to lose you some engagement probably. But if something bad happens to them, like their shop is stolen, or there was an assassination attempt by the BBEG, but they foil it, they failed, but the NPC is still scared that they're going to be attacked again. Ooh, that's going to get a lot of player investment. Even something as simple as a villain or, a small side quest character stealing an item from a party member doesn't even need to be anything big. It can just be a regular sword, or even something as small as a +1, long sword. That, taking things from the players, that's going to get them super invested. They're going to want to get revenge for that. And seriously though, that's a great barometer and gauge for how engaged and invested the players are in a campaign. How often or do they think about your campaign outside of sessions? If it is on the more side, that's very good. Even if it's on the lower side, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it's harder to gauge. We're looking for the high end though. Even something as simple as, hey, I was wanting to know more about the lore of your campaign world. I had a question about X god or this event. Can we talk about it? Fantastic. That's A+. That makes sure that you know that your players are thinking, they're engaged, they're invested. But you had a second question though, which is, there are enormous amounts of resources for maps, adventures, and so on. YouTube, Patreon, specific websites, as well as subscription services. How about a top 5 or maybe one from each category, Patreon, YouTube websites, etc.? Note, I am using Roll20. Let's see, if I had to give 5 or 6 DM tools right off the bat to use, I think for Virtual Tabletop, I personally use Foundry. I think Foundry is more powerful than Roll20, and I think that, yeah, I've talked to some of the developers and people who have used Foundry. We'll talk about some of them later, but Foundry's backend is so much better for the developers, basically. They are better able to implement their modules and their designs into that virtual tabletop in ways that they can't do with Roll20. So, Foundry is just naturally going to be more powerful, and you're going to get more bang for your buck from going onto Foundry. I think the thing I love most about Foundry, though, is the modules. How you can download one of tens of thousands of modules from thousands of creators that are just going to make your game instantly better for free. It's the closest thing I've come to the Skyrim modding community in a TTRPG. I mean, there are some fantastic add-ons out there that should cost, 10, 20, 30 bucks. I'd pay for some of them, but you're able to get those for free, or you're able to go on certain Patreons and to download everything that they got, and it's going to be automatically installed into Foundry for you. Fantastic, amazing, great. Foundry has all my support and all my love. It's the thing that I recommend to literally everyone. So, Foundry. If you're looking for a virtual tabletop, Foundry. Then if you're looking for map creation, Incarnate. Incarnate has some of the best map making out there. It's simple, it's intuitive to use. You can begin to use it for free, and you can upgrade to the paid version. I think the paid version is significantly more powerful, but I made do with the non-paid version for a number of years, and I still got satisfactory results, but getting the paid version really took my experience to the next level, which is, I think, what you want it to do. You can go for free, or you can upgrade if you're really going to use the software a lot, which I do. Running 6 to 7 campaigns a week. It's pretty big. For music and maps, though, it's Describe. Describe and their new product, Opus, are actually fantastic. Describe is not paying me in this video to talk about their product, I will have you know, but I'm going to begin shouting from the rooftops how great they are. Their maps are great. Their descriptions that they're giving to new Dungeon Masters, fantastic. They're never going to use AI. They are all hand-written and created by humans, and it shows. And Opus is fantastic. I've recommended Opus to my friends, and they are beginning to use it, and they are loving it. That's the highest praise I can give a product. When my friends, my other players, my other DM friends come back to me and said, hey, we tried Opus, it's everything you said. It's fantastic. And Describe and Opus, they link to Foundry. They link to Foundry. It's fantastic. So you can get over 3,000 audio tracks downloaded into your virtual tabletop like that. Also, I think probably now hundreds of maps with descriptions built in. Describe is fantastic. I have to recommend it. In terms of keeping notes, one that I've been looking at recently is LoreFrog. LoreFrog is kind of like Obsidian, kind of an interconnected, simple, almost like plot web generator. And its simplicity, and also a free version, is something I find very appealing for new Dungeon Masters. So if you're trying to organize your DM notes and to do so for free and to have it be very simplistic and new user friendly, not friendly, LoreFrog. LoreFrog's fantastic, and I like them a lot. Full disclosure though, they're supporting future videos. They're supporting future videos for the same reason that Describe is being supported, and they're here and they're being advertised, because I genuinely think that they're really good. So take that with a grain of salt. I think their competitor is Obsidian though, so take a look at both of them, figure out which one you like more. I know if I'm recommending it for a new DM, and honestly, continuing into the future, I really like LoreFrog. It's one of my favorites. I'm not personally subscribed to many Patreons though, I just don't have the financial position to do that. But there are many creators that I love and support. MCDM Productions, if you are a new Dungeon Master who wants epic material, that's something I always recommend. MCDM, very, very, very high quality. I have not seen them miss yet. I mean, I think their second book what is it? Was it Kingdoms and Warfare or whatever their second book was? I think that was a little bit lower quality than the rest. Not by much. It wasn't a bad book or anything, but it didn't blow me away. The new Flee Mortals book, fantastic though. All of their new classes that they release, balanced and fantastic, with great new rule sets that take D&D 5th edition to the next level. And I can't wait to see what their new RPG is going to be like. But third-party content, I can always feel safe and comfortable with MCDM Productions in the ways that I can't necessarily with Kobold Press. Kobold Press will put out some products that I just do not like. You know, they're some adventures, some books, they just don't have the quality. So with that, I can't give the blanket, yes, buy anything that they have because it's great. And of course, there are other softwares that you can download to make your life easier, but the main thing that I try to impress on new Dungeon Masters is to make sure you're running a fun game first and then figure out everything behind. Because for a lot of these systems, for a lot of these softwares, there's a learning curve there. And in that learning curve, you might be using time to learn that software rather than making a good game. You know, you can have all the bells and whistles that you want, but if the underlying design of your campaign and the underlying running of that campaign is bad, if it doesn't engage your players, there's nothing you can do. It can be the prettiest VTT in the world, with the best music, the best audio quality, the best notes, whatever, you'll still fail. You'll still fail. So, you know, it's tough, and you want to use the best software you can. You want to have the best play experience for your players. But through it all, I go back to that old video game setting. You know, graphics don't really matter. Gameplay matters. And the graphics in TTRPGs are softwares like this. They are the VTT and how you set it up. They are the music. They are the notes, everything like that. The note, I would say the note-taking system and software that you use. But the real meat of it is how you run your games. So if you're thinking about, okay, do I figure out this new software, or do I spend the next hour making sure that my campaign is fully prepped, that it's great, that I've, you know, crossed my T's, dotted my I's, 10 out of 10 times I would say work on the campaign and make sure that is perfect. Let's see, next question though. I'm not one to run NPCs in or around the party for long periods, but this campaign my players already have one hireling and seem set on gathering a gaggle of side characters to take along for the adventure. They're having lots of fun with it, so I at least want to give it a go. So any general tips or experience you have in managing a couple side NPCs that are along for the ride would be appreciated. Dude, let the side NPCs come. Side NPCs are some of the best parts of campaigns. You know, they're the dessert. These NPCs that the party has fallen in love with. That's like the baseline engagement that you're always going to get. This entire video has been leading up to this point. Take the side NPCs with you. Side NPCs are great. Out of, golly, at least more than 30 TTRPG campaigns I've run, side NPCs have been in 30 out of 30 of them. They're awesome. I mean, they're what the players love. And if you have NPCs, if you've gotten to that level where the NPCs become beloved by the party, you're doing great. Let those NPCs come. Firstly, though, I would figure out how many side NPCs a party can support. A party of 4 can usually support about 2 side NPCs, depending on how role-playing focused your party is. As soon as you go above 6, you're usually looking at probably 1 that most DMs can manage effectively. As soon as you go higher than 6, a side NPC is, you know, you're going to have 1, and even then they might fall into the background. Now, the smaller number of players you have, the more side NPCs you can get away with. For once a party of 3, they had 4 side NPCs with them, 4 followers that went along, and that was going great. You know, campaign finished at level 20, success. Loved the side NPCs, still talk about a few of them to this day. Now for combats, I recommend letting the players run the NPCs in combat, actually giving a player one of the character sheets, one of the stat blocks for the NPCs, and having them make all the decisions. And this does a lot of things. One, it's going to give your players more time in combat. They're going to be doing more things, and it's going to keep them more invested than if you have X amount of turns that are taken up by the side NPCs. But also, it's going to make those players fall in love even more deeply with those NPCs because they've played as them. You know, they have experience with them. And because of that, they're going to grow even more attached and engage with those NPCs. Another tip that I would have, though, for these NPCs in combat is to make sure they occupy a unique niche, that you're not overstepping on something that another player character is doing. So if you don't have a ranged attacker, a ranged non-magical attacker in a party, then maybe that's the role that this NPC takes. Or maybe you don't have a support spellcaster, someone who heals and gives buffs to the rest of the party. Well, maybe then the NPC can do that. But keeping it so that the NPC has their thing, all the player characters have their niches as well, is something that I really focus on whenever I'm running NPCs that are followers of the party. Biggest thing, though, is to not have these NPCs outshine the party in any way in combat. You know, they can still do decent damage, but all the party members should be the main damage dealers in combat, and the NPCs pitch in, you know, on the side if they are brought into fights. But the party are the main characters, and having an NPC or multiple NPCs outshine the party is how you can lead these NPCs into the DMPC territory where they start being the main characters. So always keeping in mind that these NPCs, not NPCs, should be helping the party in general and not taking away spotlight from the players. And that kind of leads into my last point about these follower NPCs, which is that usually when you're prepping for them, they should highlight one of the player characters in some way. Maybe they're a foil to them, or it gets some part of the backstory out of a player characters. You know, usually when I'm prepping for a session, it's okay, for each one of these NPCs that's with the party, you know, what is something that they can do to highlight a player character, that we can have an interesting role-playing moment at some point, you know? If a player character is incredibly greedy, then I might have an NPC who's a follower who shows that they are incredibly charitable, and showing the juxtaposition between that player character and the NPC and how they're going to play off of each other. Or maybe I have an NPC that is wrestling with, you know, a moral quandary or something that another player character is wrestling with, and they might go to that player character, and now we can have a role-playing moment between that NPC and that player character where that player character gets to shine. They get to say, this is what I think about this particular thing, and they're not only answering the NPC, but they're answering questions within themselves too. Also, follower NPCs are just great because the party is walking into disaster. You have a mouthpiece that can say, hey, this might be dangerous for X, Y, and Z reasons. You don't do it every time, but it can be that final, lever that you can pull if things are really going bad, if they're going terribly. So honestly, I kind of feel bad for you that you haven't been doing follower NPCs. They're one of the things that make sessions great for me. When I'm a player, I'm always looking for that NPC that I can say, you're coming with us now. You're awesome. I want to spend more time with you. Just making sure that you have the right number of them, that none of them get left in the dust, and that there are certain sessions where follower NPCs just say and do nothing. That's a problem. If that happens. And otherwise, just making sure that the player characters are indeed the main characters. Yeah, go for it. Have more of these types of NPCs. And there is one last general set of questions that I'd like to answer, and they popped up on the most recent video centering around cinematic combats. And these questions were basically about, hey, can you run a live session or an actual play to show this thing at work? And I think the answer is, for right now, no. I am obviously fine showing my face on the internet. However, the internet is a shitty place sometimes, and it's open to criticism. And at least for my players, I don't want to expose them to that. You guys, 95% of the time in the comment sections are great. However, that other 5% can can be really detrimental to anyone's mental health. It just sucks because you guys don't see the behind the scenes for some of these videos. If you spend 10 to 20 hours writing, researching, recording, editing a video, one of these comments, it feels like a dig to the heart, especially if you're running a campaign, if you're playing in a session. That's an attack kind of on you. I mean, not really. We know it's not an attack, but it still hurts. It does. And I don't want to subject my players to that. So, if there are people who are willing to sign up for that, if you have an actual play on the internet, all is fair in love and war. Say whatever you want to, not whatever you want to those people, of course, but we all kind of know what's coming. We know that there's going to be criticism there. And for players that don't want that, and campaigns that just want to be, a fun time, and, people who aren't in the public spotlight, it's not great. It's just not a great thing to do to them. So yeah, if I'm invited on an actual play show and I have players on that show who know what the internet is, they know the criticism that they're opening themselves up to, and they're still okay with it, yeah, I'm going to show all of this stuff off to you. But I don't want that kind of criticism on my players and on my friends, because some of the stuff that gets said in the YouTube comments section, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I try to keep my comment sections as clean as possible, but obviously some things still slip through. So, it's probably not going to happen for the foreseeable future, or unless something drastic happens. It would probably have to be my players coming to me and saying, yo, we actually want to do something like this. We want to have a one-shot or a small campaign, and even then, it's a huge lift. I just don't think it would be that much fun to watch. Like, we might have a small demonstration, but even then, it would be a huge undertaking to make sure everything was right. Even this here, making sure I have the lighting right, and the background's not finished yet, obviously, but it doesn't look that great, I think. It's an even bigger pull to make sure that an actual play show has the type of quality that we're looking for, so that it actually is semi-watchable. There are so many times when it's just not that watchable. I don't know if I could make something that would be watchable to most of you. So, yep, that's kind of the answer there. Will there be actual plays? Maybe. Probably not with my players at home, though. I want to keep them kind of in their own bubble. If I'm invited somewhere else, yeah, I'll be showing all of this off. All of it, definitely. That's where we stand right now. But also, thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. I know that we passed 25 now, I think 26,000 subscribers fairly recently, which is a huge milestone. I never thought that we would get here at all. It seems so crazy that there are so many of you that are watching these videos and contributing, liking, subscribing, all of that. It's mesmerizing, so thank you. And again, there will be more of this in future videos, so you can look forward to that. And if you want to watch some old videos, you can check out this video right here. It's going to be more of the same, just with less face. Also, if you want me coaching you one-on-one, helping to make you a better game master in any system, check out my Patreon. It is a fantastic experience, and yeah, I love to do it. And also, thank you all for entering the dungeon. See ya.